So I've got the ATIP question, and you said that you did not send information to the minister. You said that a few minutes ago. So be careful, because I have information here.
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
I find it very interesting, as do many Canadian creators, that the government tried to insist that user-generated content was not scoped in within the legislation, but then needed to give a directive to the CRTC with regard to that end. That actually suggests that it is, in fact, within the framework of the legislation, hence the need for the directive. Nevertheless, you also mentioned that you function at an arm's length. Your mandate letter says, quote, the independence of the CRTC along with the transparency of its processes will be of the highest importance. However, there is a page on the CRTC's website titled Myths and Misconceptions. And when I read it, it is verbatim the talking points from the minister's office, the talking points that he used over and over and over again in the House of Commons and right here at this committee table. So I'm curious as to who authorized the publishing of the Myths and Facts page.
So I can briefly speak to that and I can turn things over to our head of broadcasting. We are an independent quasi-judicial tribunal.
I'm just curious who authorized the publication of that page.
So we are independent. The CRTC...
I understand. I'm just curious who authorized it.
The CRTC did draft those myths and facts in order to provide some clarity for Canadians in terms of what was going to happen with the implementation of the legislation. So that is something that was drafted by and approved by the CRTC.
Okay. Ms. Uchudis, as the head of that organization, did you authorize it?
I did.
Okay, thank you. That was simple. I'm now curious because I have this OPQ in front of me, which is an access to information that members of Parliament, of course, can submit. And in it, one of the question that was asked by my colleague, Mr. Shields, was what type of communication took place between the department and the CRTC? And one of the things that went from the department over to the CRTC was, quote, media lines and questions and answers. That doesn't speak of independence. Why would the Heritage Department send you media lines and questions and answers if you're functioning at an arm's length?
So I can tell you with full certainty that we absolutely are independent. I do know that our communications team sometimes does share some communications information, not for comment, but just for information.
Okay, but questions and answers. Could you not come up with those on your own if you're supposed to be functioning independent?
Again, I can't speak to exactly what was shared, but the communications teams do sometimes share some communications information for information.
Okay, so not exactly independent. One of the things that is said by the CRTC is that content and digital creators will not be regulated. Of course, on September 29th, out came a podcast registry. Now, I understand that you will try to lead this committee to believe that you are not actually regulating podcasters, but rather the platforms. But what's interesting is that podcasters rely on those platforms in order to get their podcasts out. And of course, by regulating the platforms, those that use them are in fact regulated. For example, if a bookstore is mandated that they can only sell red books, that doesn't impact the publishers. The publishers aren't being regulated. In fact, they are, because of course, if they publish a blue book, its sales are going nowhere. A green book, its sales are going nowhere. So in looking after the platform or mandating things to the platform, you are in fact mandating those that are producing content. Is that not true?
And I'll be very clear with this, we are not regulating individual podcasts. We are not regulating podcast content, and we are not regulating podcast creators.
Sure. I understand that you're not doing that directly, but you are doing it indirectly, and it's a distinction without a difference. We'll leave it there.
So if there's time to respond to that, perhaps I could explain what that decision did, which... Okay, thank you. Which was ask that large platforms provide basic information like contact information with respect to their services, and that would include podcasts. And that is the extent of it. So I wouldn't say that it's that we are regulating in that
Why
space.
are you asking for registration?
I'm sorry, your time is up.
Millions of dollars being spent on journalists. There is a line of integrity that I think has been crossed.
So I would come back to the CRTC's role. What I would say is that under C11 and under the hearings that we're holding right now, we are looking at whether certain money, if we do go the base contribution route for online streaming services, should some of that money go to news funds?
Okay, so finally, I only have 45 seconds. June 14th, C18 passed. That was the day Bell laid off 1,300 employees, 6% of their workforce. Then they shut down 6 radio stations. Then on that same day C18 passed, they turn to you and say, we want to do less local news. What was your response to Bell officials that day?
20 seconds.
That request that came in the form of an application is still with commission staff.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kevin.
So I've got the ATIP question, and you said that you did not send information to the minister. You said that a few minutes ago. So be careful, because I have information here. So they sent it to you then, because I know what they sent. I know went back and forth. So when it talks about media lines, I know what those are. So they sent them to you then. You didn't send them to them, you said, so they sent them to you.
Again, there is some exchange of communications materials.
You said you didn't send them to them, then they sent them to you, media lines, right?
I don't know what
I do.
media lines.
I do. I've got it
but-
here, and I've got the information, so I know. So be careful.
But again, if information is shared for information, then that happens through communications, and it's not for comment.
So they sent it to you. You said you didn't send it to them, so they then sent those media lines to you. Thank you.
I don't
Moving
know if
on.
any media lines
I've got
were
other
sent.
questions to ask.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
I can move on. I can move to my next
You
question.
can move on, but you asked a
Thank
question.
you.
We should hear the answer.
She said
She asked to be able to answer the question.
she gave me the answer. You also. Thank you. So Scott, you said
Point of order, Madam
needed.
Chair. The witness was asked a question and was not afforded the opportunity to respond.
I did make that point, and
Thank
I
you.
think the witness should be able to respond. The chair decides who responds and who speaks. Go ahead.
Point of order. Point of order.
Yes, Mrs. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. If you seek clarity from the clerk, I believe that you will find that the members of this committee have the ability to make a statement should they wish to, or ask a question. If my colleague chose to make a statement, that is his prerogative.
Well, it sounded like a question, but there you go. If it's
Point of
a
order.
statement, is it a statement, Mr. Shields?
Yes.
Thank you. All right.
Now,
so-
there's a phrase out there that says, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help you. That's an oxymoron in my writing. Very scary. So if you ask, if needed, right, you stated, you're collecting that information if needed, right?
Yes, I did say that, yeah.
What does if needed mean?
If needed in this case means we have a broad mandate to look at the broadcasting system in Canada. We're at the front end of this. The question was raised, does podcasting impact the broadcasting system in Canada? We have no specific questions about it right now. We've preserved the ability to contact large companies that distribute podcasts in the future if needed. I don't see this as particularly controversial to say that there are elements of the broadcasting system we need to be in touch with if we develop policies. We have no policies regarding podcasts on the table at the moment.
But you're saying that if needed.
Yes, absolutely. We're a quasi-judicial tribunal, and I can't speak to a theoretical for the future.
But you're setting it up for that as a registration, basically, because you're saying, if needed, we will need your contact information.
Yes.
Thank you.
If-
Thank you. Appreciate that. One of the things you said is that you're collecting information on what is Canadian attitudes, opinions, ideas, and values, right? You're collecting information, and the documentation says that's what you're collecting information about.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to.
When you're out there engaging, you're looking for Canadian values, what are Canadians in podcasting?
My apologies, I'm not sure which document you are referring to. If you're referring to the registration consultation as a whole, we could address that, but I apologize, I'm not aware of the context of your question.
Okay, I'll move to the next one. You're talking about connectivity and the word "the last community." Is that a phrase I've heard today, getting to the last community?
That's not a phrase that I use.
But I heard that used from one of you saying getting the internet connected to the last community.
To remote, rural, and indigenous communities?
It's the last community. To the last farm gate is where it needs to be. I'm going to turn the time over to my colleague.
There's 25 seconds from Mrs. Thomas. 20 now.
I just need a mic. Thank you, Chair. At this point in time, I'll be moving a motion. There's only so much time where we are in public and where we have the opportunity to move a motion that we feel is of great importance. As other parties have done, I will take this opportunity. I recognize that we have a witness here, and so I'm happy to move the motion, make a statement, and then we can move to a vote quickly if we wish. The motion is as follows.
Order, Madam Chair. Last time the CRTC was here, we had a filibuster from the Conservatives that blocked the CRTC for testifying for
This
over an
isn't a
hour.
point of order.
And this time, we have another hour
Point of
where
order?
the CRTC
I must
is available.
listen to what the member is saying before I can rule on whether
Are
it's
you
a
yelling
point
at
of
me?
order or not. I'm not, pardon?
Are you yelling at me?
So,
No, I'm just trying to speak over you because you continue to speak.